will dissolve involuntarily into smiles. It's like you saw it time and again. When someone walks up, even full battle rattle, and then says Salamu Alaikum, the reaction was, this guy comes in peace. It was about the instant that Captain Funkhauser was reaching out his hand that the insurgents' command detonated a 500-pound car bomb that was ahead of us. It was parked among the cars alongside the street. It sent a wall of shrapnel through us, killing the captain and his translator and at least one guy at the T-stand instantly, killing James, leaving Paul fighting for his life, and cutting through me and Private Justin Farrar, who was right next to me, the captain's PSD, personal security detail, who'd been forced to stay back with me, something he struggles with to this day. I felt the blast, didn't know what it was, don't know if I lost consciousness, but I came to in a world of hurt and tried to lift my head, tried to figure out what was going on, and tried to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to do now? This is when all your training comes back to you. You know, you do combat medical training, and you remember airway, breathing, circulation. Okay, if I scream out loud, I'm one of those patients from the drills who you ignore because, hey, they're screaming, they've got an airway. You go to the ones who are silent to clear their airway, restart their heart. So I'm having this debate. Okay, I'm in a lot of pain. I need help. But if I call for help, no one will come to me. Lifted my head and saw a burning car. Now, of course, the car bomb itself was obliterated, but one of the cars parked there was on fire. And I thought, I remember another drill where if a patient is in immediate danger, like if there's a live electricity wire flapping around, you've got to remove them from the scene. So I feel burning in my legs. I see a burning car. That car's burning me. I'm in immediate danger. I can call for help. I didn't understand that I was already studded with burning shrapnel from my hips to my ankles. Medic Izzy Flores was doing his first multiple combat casualty triage, and he'd gotten to captain and to the translator, and then as I found out later, he'd gotten to Paul and got a tourniquet on him immediately. And then he got to me, apparently just about the time I started saying, "Help, help, pull me away from the burning car," sounding like a cliche in my head to myself. And Izzy said to himself, airway, you're good, and he went to someone else. What he didn't know was my femoral artery was also cut, and I was bleeding out. Just to give you a laundry list, I had a piece of shrapnel to my brain that they didn't find until much later. Both femurs were shattered, and I was covered with 1st to 3rd degree burns from my hips to my ankles and studded with car parts, some of them still on fire. And Paul was fighting for his life, and so were a couple other guys at the scene, including Justin Farrar and Staff Sergeant Nathan Reed. Now, Paul passed away. It took the CASEVAC team an hour to get to us. By the time I got to the cache, I coded 5 times, but they kept bringing me back. I don't remember anything till launch stool. But when I woke up, and they eventually told me that Paul and James were dead, especially later in the hospital in Bethesda Naval, when this came back to me over and over and over. The one thing that helped knowing was that no one else died because I got help first. I was one of the last to receive help, and that is something that I have clung to ever since. It becomes very important. When I woke up in launch stool, I remembered seeing a sea of faces around me. When you're on so much painkiller, time gets distorted. But I do remember seeing Mom and Dad. We've since lost my mom. But Mom and Dad from Baltimore, my sister from Vietnam, my then boyfriend from New Zealand, and a brother and sister-in-law from North Carolina, and kind of going, this is like the story of my life. What are these people all doing around my hospital bed? Mom and Dad said something like, you're going to be fine. Dad said something like, you're going to keep your legs. Or maybe that was Mei Lee. But then the thing that most disturbed me, Pete, who I'd been dating at that point for about 3 years, said something I'd never heard him say before. "I love you." That's when I knew I was really in trouble. Oh my gosh, I'm hurt. It took something like 36 surgeries in the end to put my legs back together. And a couple months before I was able to start standing and seeing whether or not the legs would be working again. But I will never forget, there was a doctor in Landstuhl who said to me, "We've just put 2 titanium rods through both femurs. We don't know if we got the angle right. We don't know if you'll ever walk properly again." And I lay there in the hospital bed, coming out of heaven knows how many surgeries at that point, in a lot of pain. They'd been power washing the burns in my legs as well. Basically, if I look down, now that we're finished the meal, my legs were just a sea of ground beef. If they offer you a chance, if you're ever injured, they say, "Do you want to see your injuries while we change the dressings?" Say no. So I looked at the doctor and I'm like, "Gee, thanks for that." I was months from knowing whether or not he was right. Now I know he was tired and he was just trying to give me, the God's honest truth, but I didn't need any bad news at that point. And it would be months before I would be able to prove him wrong. But then again, maybe he knew what he was doing. And we talk about that hope and fear thing. At that point, I could go, okay, I might never walk properly again. So that means it's down to me. That brings us to Bethesda Naval Hospital and 2 experiences, dealing with the pain of losing Paul and James and post-traumatic stress, and dealing with PT. Now, PT, first of all. It's a painful process. And this is one of the ways I found out how brave my dad is. In my case, it involved lifting my legs and cranking them, because when you have a head wound and blast injuries, your bones often overheal and put flakes into the joints. It's called heterotopic ossification. To keep my joints from freezing into place, the physiotherapist had to crank them to break the microflakes. This was an hour process every day after the grafts had set, and my mom had seen me go through enough pain. She had real trouble with this process. So my dad, we've already discussed how brave he is, my dad would take my mom into the waiting room and basically lock her behind 2 fire doors so she could not hear me scream. Because my dad has had his knees replaced a number of times, and he knew this just had to be. He had also always told the doctors had said, "You'll get 50 degrees back." He's like, "Okay, I'll get 70 degrees back." And so that was my inspiration. I'd sit there and scream through, scream, that kind of thing. And I got there to the point where now I run 10Ks, should be running marathons, just haven't quite gotten there yet. So my legs work. The doctors told me that often loved ones would, just like that, they want to keep their loved one in a cocoon and would retard their growth, that retard their healing, because healing hurts like hell. You've got to let them go through it, or you've got to go through it. Now, post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic stress disorder, okay. I woke up thinking about Paul and James every morning, from nightmares, thinking about how they died, and I would bawl my eyes out. The corpsmen were totally used to this. They would come into my room and go, "Oh yeah," because all the Marines, other injured officers down the hall, doing the same thing. You'd wake up in the morning to this nightmare. And I said, I need to talk about this. The neuropsychiatrists and my mom didn't want me talking about it. There was a psychologist who worked with special operating forces teams who came in later. He said, no, I'll take you on. Talk. By the time I left Bethesda Naval, say 6 weeks after the original injury, the flashbacks, the nightmares, the emotional highs and lows, all the stuff that are normal parts of post-traumatic stress, they all went away. I firmly believe that if I hadn't been allowed to talk my head off, I mean, every person who came into the room had to listen to a version of this story that you've just heard. And they're all freaking out, and I'm not paying any attention to them. My beepers are going off, but I had to tell everything I could remember, moment by moment. I believe that's why my post-traumatic stress, which is the body's normal way of processing something, never became a habit, which is what's diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the 2 units that I was with, there was an Iowa National Guard unit that responded to the scene and an Iowa National Guardsman who put the tourniquets on me that saved my life. So they're on my Facebook page, I'm in touch with them, and then there's the 4th ID unit.